Hey everybody, this video is going to go over the second PowerPoint in the week 4 module for values and assumptions. So we already went over the first PowerPoint, values and assumptions part 1, but I want to get a little bit deeper into values and assumptions on their own. Because in the first PowerPoint, we kind of talked about them in general. We looked at the Toolman model specifically. We talked about warrants, which involve the values and assumptions, but I want to take a closer look at how values and assumptions operate in an argument. All right, so looking at the first slide of the PowerPoint after the title slide, one of the things I want you guys to realize is that we are constantly encountering subtle strategies, techniques that are designed to get us to think a particular way. Even if it is very subtle, even if it's just the slightest nudge in a particular direction, it's there everywhere. Businesses, activists, government offices, and just people in your everyday lives, we choose language, our word choice. We choose language that corresponds to what we value and what we hope for. And if someone is trying to persuade us of something, then they are definitely going to be using that type of language that coincides with our values and our hopes. Arguments emerge. They come from value systems. They come from the collective group of ideals that people share. Those values that we cherish, right? To give you guys a better sense of what we mean by values and that sort of collective idea of values, slide 3 gives you a table of some very common underlying values that we as a society, we as a culture, hold dear to our hearts. Things like achievement, affection, art, community, competition. We value competition. We value country, right? We value democracy. We value efficiency. We value fame. Some of us might like to say we don't, but I think as a culture we do. We value friendships. We value hard work and independence and integrity and intellect and honesty, loyalty, knowledge. We value order, right? We don't like chaos. We value money, power, privacy, public service, relationships, religion, responsibility, self-respect, status, security, wealth, wisdom. We value work, we value truth. And even though, wisdom tends to come with age and we do value wisdom, we also value youth, right? This is obviously not an exhaustive list of all the underlying values that we share culturally, but these are definitely some of the common ones. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that most of us would understand that what these values indicate, what they are all about, right? Now, the tricky part is seeing how they're tapped into in an argument, okay? So that's what we're going to kind of look at. We don't always see that values and assumptions are being used in an argument. But if you think about the example that's on slide 4, when we make the argument that the president of the United States should be at least 35 years old, that no one is even allowed to run for that office prior to that age, we are subtly tapping into the shared value of wisdom. That's what comes with age, right? That's why there is an age limit for the office of the president, because presumably with age comes wisdom, and we value wisdom. So even though it is not stated in that argument, it's the driving force behind the argument. And sometimes you have to really kind of sit and analyze an argument, even just a statement or a slogan. You really have to figure out what values are being, I don't want to say exploited, because it's not always for negative means. Sometimes it is. But for lack of a better word, what values are being exploited to get us to respond to this argument. Understanding how those values work helps us read argument more effectively and write argument more effectively, to be a more effective arguer, ethically, of course. But there are some things you need to be aware of, especially as you are reading or engaging in argument, someone else's argument. You would also want to make sure that you don't commit these problems in your own argument. But the first step is always being aware of them in someone else's argument, and then moving forward with your own. So the first, what we want to talk about here are arguments in disguise. So oftentimes the most persuasive arguments are the ones in disguise, like a report, right? You wouldn't think that it's an argument, or history, or songs, advertisements. Well, maybe you would be leery of advertisements, and just harmless statements and slogans, right? We see them first as objective, right? As that it's not an argument that's being presented to us. However, the persuasive power is that it's the silent appeal to those values, and that we don't even realize sometimes that we are engaging in argument. So when our intellectual backs are turned, when we're not conscious of it, when we're not paying attention, when we're not on guard, if you will, we can be persuaded into consuming a particular worldview. Advertising is a really great example of that, and we're going to look at some of that. And we can learn to see through those appeals and recognize a selective portrayal of facts, if you will, and to recognize persuasion even when it's hidden. So we're going to look at 4 common types of arguments in disguise. And the first one is the objectivity disguise, and I kind of touched on this already. The objectivity disguise fools the audience into thinking that the information that's being presented is unbiased, that it is objective. Because an objective statement or an objective report is supposed to lack personal opinion. You should not be able to tell one way or the other where the author falls on the issue. They are just the facts, ma'am, right? It's supposed to solely present the facts. However, facts don't appear out of thin air, right? And if you are reporting on something, there's probably a multitude of facts about that issue or about that event, about that situation, and presenting all of them might not be realistic. You have to contain it, if you will, so that whatever you're reporting on is not forever long or so bogged down in facts and details that the reader's not even going to want to continue reading it. So we have to select what we are going to present, and even when it appears to be objective, someone still chose which facts to include, which facts to emphasize, which ones to minimize, or even ignore completely, leave out completely. So those decisions, which facts to include or leave out, they help create a particular version of the truth. Okay, and on the next 2 slides, I have an example of this. So we have this news report, right? So it says, today in Florida, protesters blocked sidewalks and caused undue congestion in downtown Miami. The protesters were demanding a change in voting statewide. When reached for comment, the Miami chief of police said that 2 people were arrested for blocking the free flow of traffic and that everything was back to normal by 6 p.m. Okay, there doesn't appear to be an opinion injected in that little report, right? If we're not paying close attention, it does sound as though just the facts are being presented, right? Because they're not. We can't necessarily point to any sentence or any section of that report and say, oh, clearly, the author feels this way. But if you look deeper, you actually can. First of all, we're referring to this group of people as protesters, right? So we want to make the person who wrote this little report, they wanted to make sure that we focused on that term for this group of people, not concerned citizens, not a group of voters' rights supporters or anything like that. They wanted to make sure we saw them as protesters. And that's not good or bad. I mean, they are protesters, right? But as you get further along into the report, then the use of that term specifically takes on a different significance. So we also see, if we look closely, that the protesters are kind of they're painted in a light that makes them seem like a nuisance, right? They blocked sidewalks and caused undue congestion, things that most of us don't like. We don't like when people block the sidewalks. We really don't like when, there's a lot of traffic and the streets are congested, right? So that's interesting. The whole report, that little paragraph, it focuses on the effects of the protesting, doesn't really mention the cause. Yeah, they're, demanding a change in voting statewide, but that's really vague. So we're not really concerned at all about their true reason for being there, for protesting in the first place. What this report is concerned about is how the protesting affected that area. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. Okay, why out of all the people that it could have referred to in this report, why the chief of police? Why did we go there? Why is that the person we decided to quote or refer to? Because we needed to make sure that the readers knew that 2 people were arrested. So almost like the protesters are like criminals, right? And we also needed to include that the chief said that things are now back to normal. And we like normal, right? We don't like when things are out of order. So it basically, even though there's no obvious opinion inserted into this little report, if we look at the facts they chose to present, it does lean a certain way, and you can tell that ultimately we're supposed to see the protests as offensive and inherently wrong. They're a nuisance, possibly criminal, and not normal. That's how we're supposed to view protests according to how this report presents its information. It is all fact. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is false about the information, but they definitely made strategic decisions about what information to include and how to word things. Now, on the next slide, you get a totally different version of that event, right? So this version says, today in Florida, over 5,000 protesters assembled in front of the courthouse in Miami to draw attention to the inequality in voting technology across the state. According to organizers, wealthier counties have more updated technologies than poorer ones, and officials have yet to address the disparity. Said Martha Krug, a voting rights advocate, It is un-American and against basic principles of democracy. Well, this one leans the exact opposite way, obviously. There's no hint of the protest being seen as a nuisance. There's no hint of the protesters being seen as criminal. And they are appealing to some very strongly held values in our culture. Um, they assembled, which indicates a more orderly fashion, right? It's not chaos. They want to draw attention to inequity, and so we're not demanding, we are drawing attention to inequity in voting technology. So we value equality, and voting technology, we value our right to vote. We value democracy, which they get to at the end as well, according to organizers, right? So not just protesters, not just advocates. They threw in the word organizers to combat that idea that protests are chaos, right? We like order. Wealthier counties have more updated technologies than poorer ones, and officials have yet to address the disparity. So we're throwing, we're casting another group in a negative light, right? The county officials or state officials, they're not doing anything about it. And then Martha Krug, she's a voting rights advocate. She's not a protester. She's an advocate. It is un-American and against the basic principles of democracy. Well, I mean, my goodness. So this one subtly urges us to see the protests as necessary and positive, and that, if we are American and we love, and we value democracy and order and equality, then by golly, not only should we support these protests, but maybe we need to get on a plane and head to Miami and join them. Like, that's how much they're tapping into those shared values in just this little report. And there's another version of this event out there, that's going to include totally different facts and words and references. So even though it comes off as objective, and that's how we're supposed to see it, if you look closely, it might not really be all that objective, right? Even in like a scientific report, not like a news article like this, but like literally a scientific report, people are still choosing what to include in that report. And, are we going to trust that they're including everything that we need to know? And I don't know that we can know the answer to that, prior to reading a scientific report. But that's why we have to keep those critical eyes open when we're reading it, is to look for any moments where, things have been left out or things have been worded in a way that appeal to certain values or sensibilities that we might have. Right? So the second type of argument in disguise is the personal taste disguise. So this is where we're really just trying to appeal to what people like, their personal tastes and their desires. And while doing that, though, we're presenting an argument to them, but we're hiding the argument within that appeal to their likes and dislikes. It speaks directly to like our passion, our love for color, our love for sex, belonging, family fun, and in the midst of all that, there's a hidden argument. It kind of is most obvious in argument or in advertising, but it can be found pretty much in any genre, but advertising really, really capitalizes on this. And a single advertisement isn't going to make us behave a certain way or accept a certain value system. But advertising is a part of the reality we live in, and there's so much of it that the sheer repetition of the argument can really shape how we view things. And I have a few slides that follow this one Using just as an example how advertising shapes how our society views women and beauty. You know, like seeing one advertisement for a makeup product is not going to make us go buy it, and it's not going to make us feel all of a sudden like we need it. But through the sheer repetition, it starts to shape how we view the world and our notions of beauty. So, I don't want to spend a lot of time going over each one of these slides. You kind of have to take them as a whole and see the progression. But we're looking at covers of Cosmopolitan magazine. And we start in the 70s and we go all the way up to like 2015, I think. So I tried to get one from every decade so you could kind of see the evolution of the covers and see how they change in some ways and how they stay the same in other ways, and what the, the material on the cover, how it shapes our worldview about women. So obviously, any magazine cover, look at the cover girl. She is going to embody some standard of beauty that we accept culturally, and it's going to change every decade, but that's still why she's on there. Look at the different things around her, the headlines, if you will. So we've got some communication advice on this one. Start telling the truth, no matter how gruesome the hurt or defeat. We've got stuff about birth control. This is the 70s, remember. We've got stuff about talking, to a doctor or a doctor's advice for worry and anxiety. So apparently that's something that a lot of women during the 70s may have been dealing with, right? Or that they're supposed to be dealing with, right? Because if I were a woman in the 70s and I didn't really have much worry or anxiety, and I'm looking at this cover, am I thinking doctor's antidotes for those worry and anxiety feelings? Like, why on the cover of Cosmo? Like, how many women are feeling this way? I don't feel that way. Am I doing something wrong? Am I not? Do I not care enough? Am I not invested enough in my family or in my job or whatever? See how it can get in your head. So we've got wives run away too, tell a man how to please you, how to get money, celebrity crash diets, and then some reviews and excerpts from books. So we're supposed to, take control and tell a man how to please us. We're supposed to learn how to get money. We're supposed to want to be thin and learn how the celebrities do it. But at the same time, we're supposed to want to read and possibly the books that they're going to talk about on the covers of these magazines. If you go to the 80s, you've got Claudia Schiffer on the cover, and I don't even know what that pose is about. It's really weird. But we've got, our headlines on this one are The Joy of Sex with Older Men, Coming Down to Earth, The Hard Realities of Marriage, Natural Tranquilizers and How to Use Them, Great Christmas Gifts for the Men in Your Life, and then, again, a review and excerpt from books. So we're supposed to think about, I don't know, I guess apparently young men are not doing it for us in the 80s. Marriage is hard, which is why we need the natural tranquilizers. I don't know. But definitely presenting some information here of how women are supposed to behave, what we're supposed to feel, what we're supposed to think about, what we're supposed to prioritize, right? If these things are getting the cover of a magazine, then they're pretty important, right? We go to the 90s, the same thing. We've still got the reviews and experts. We're lonely without a man. Can monogamy be hot? So in the prior decades, it was all about marriage, and now it's like, yeah, go back to marriage. It can be hot. A day in the life of a model, right? Supposed to value that. We go to early 2000s, and the cover girl has changed a little bit. We're a little more athletic, right? We're talking about job ruts and sexy swimsuits, and U plus food equals no more guilt. So apparently we're supposed to feel guilty if we like food and eat a lot, right? But now they're going to tell us that we don't have to. But apparently enough of us do already that they need to tell us this. Dreams and wishes, the Cosmos Hot Weather Gyno Guide. Is he good in bed? So clearly our perspective has changed a little bit, what women value, what we're supposed to care about. There's no more books. We're not reading anymore. Then we get to 2015 and we get Sarah Jessica Parker on the cover. A lot of, make him worship you, be happier and in control at work, crazy sexy hair in 5 minutes, feel good in a bikini in just 5 moves, and decode his Snapchats. Oh, wow, we've entered the digital age for sure. We have entered social media. And that apparently, you can see the evolution and you can see how the covers match up to what women were supposed to value during that time period. And there's no hardcore evidence that I can present to you right now that says that what's on the cover of these magazines totally on its own shapes how we view women and like standards of beauty and what women are supposed to care about. Perhaps you could make the argument that the magazine is simply reacting to changes culturally, and therefore that's why they're putting these things on the cover, because that's the feedback they're getting, is these are the things women are interested in, so we're going to give them that, not the other way around. I don't know if, the chicken or the egg, and I don't know if there's a totally right answer to it, but I don't think you can deny that what we see on magazine covers has an effect. This was the obvious choice for me to show you. It happens everywhere. In any kind of advertising, all different kinds of argument, they appeal to our personal tastes, and don't really make it clear that an argument is being presented. You've got to be aware of it. Our third type of argument in disguise is what we call spin. It is a heavily biased portrayal of information, and it's usually used to take an event or a statement that had a negative appearance or a negative consequence and turn it into something positive, to make it seem or mean something else. It's most often associated with politics, but it could happen in any context. It's basically an effort to distract us from the real meaning or the reality of what actually happened. So we have an example here. The approval rating actually is higher than it has been at this point in the term for many presidents. We see the slight drop as a sign that the president's policies are taking root in many people's lives significantly better in the long run. First of all, I'm not sure how we got from the beginning of that statement to the end where the connection is. They totally derailed it. And it's clear that they're trying to take something that doesn't look real good and turn it into something that seems fabulous. So not only is it dishonest, sometimes it can be harmful, putting spin on things. If we have to sift through the spin to find the truth, then spin has become a tool for the advancement of a particular ideology, at the expense of everything else. And I give you another example here from Animal Farm by George Orwell. And Squealer the pig is addressing all the other farm animals. The pigs are kind of in charge, right? If you've ever read Animal Farm, you probably remember how they do away with the farmer, and now the pigs are kind of leading the animals, and not in very malevolent ways. They're not very nice pigs. So they laid down some rules in the beginning, and now the pigs are sleeping in the farmhouse, and the other animals have heard that they're sleeping in the bed, the farmer's bed, and that was a no-no. And so now the animals are starting to question their leadership, right? And Squealer is having none of it. So he comes back and says, "You have heard then, comrades, that we pigs now sleep in the beds of the farmhouse? And why not? You did not suppose, surely, that there was ever a ruling against beds. A bed merely means a place to sleep. A pile of straw in a stall is a bed, properly regarded. The rule was against sheets, which are human invention. We have removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets. And very comfortable beds they are, too. But not more comfortable than we need, I can tell you, comrades, with all the brain work we have to do nowadays. You would not rob us of our repose, would you, comrades? You would not have us too tired to carry out duties. Surely none of you wishes to see Jones back." Jones is the farmer. So the animals realize that the pigs have started breaking the rules. They're sleeping in the bed. And Squealer comes back with a technicality. No, the rule was actually against sheets. We never really mentioned anything about beds or blankets, so that's perfectly fine. And then he turns it, and then he's like, and not to mention the fact that, why shouldn't we be allowed to sleep on beds? We're leading you. We're the ones in charge here, and we do a lot of work all day long. It is not easy using these brains of ours to make sure you guys are all protected and taken care of, by golly. So, surely you don't want us to suffer. Surely you want us to get a good night's sleep, because you don't want Jones to come back, right? So he totally spins the entire situation, right? He appeals to their fear. He appeals to their sense of reason. He appeals to their need for protection and security. He basically creates a huge diversion in the second half of his little speech here. And it's really easy to see it in this example, but it's not always easy to see it in real life examples, but it's there. The fourth type of argument in disguise that we're going to look at is what we call propaganda. Okay, so propaganda is a very complex set of strategies. It's used to make the audience think or feel in a uniform way, what we call doctrine. Propaganda wants to crush differences in thinking. They don't want people thinking for themselves. They don't want people using their brains or coming up with other possibilities. They want everyone to think and feel and believe the same way, so that there's no objections, there's no potential, there's no thought, there's no reflection. Everyone just blindly accepts what is said, what they're told. And it works to unite people in a very simple way. Not a good one. So, propaganda can use the objectivity disguise and the personal taste disguise to achieve its goal. It also is very commonly uses very vague wording, right? They don't use specific wording to get caught up in a lie or a technicality. Uses a lot of repetition of words and phrases or slogans. Has very strong appeals to emotions, especially fear, anger, happiness. It has strong appeals to human need, definitely our need for belonging, our need for sex, our need for food, our need for safety. That's a big one that propaganda uses. It has strong appeals to character, the people presenting it. So whether that be the company that presents it to you, whether it be the person who's giving a speech using propaganda, or whether it's referring to or showing a well-respected person in the argument, like a celebrity perhaps, but not like regular advertising. Propaganda goes way beyond advertising. There's this idea of intellectual or moral certainty, like there's no doubt that we're right and we're not even going to entertain other possibilities. That's why they want everyone to think the same way. There's definitely an us versus them theme in propaganda, and you definitely want to be one of us, not one of them. And it's chock full of fallacies. A lot of hasty generalizations, a lot of slippery slope, a lot of faulty cause and effect, and just a lot of that either or. You're either with us or against us, and there's no middle ground. There's no gray in propaganda. So the next few slides have some examples of propaganda. The first, and again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through these. First one, we have a propaganda poster from World War II. So we've got 3 kids out on the lawn. They've got planes, and we've got an American flag, and they're just adorable. And in the grass, under and around them, is the shadow of a swastika. And the words at the bottom say, "Don't let that shadow touch them. Buy war bonds." So war bonds during the war were basically like insurance policies, you know, and almost like an investment. You'd end up getting your money back, but hopefully, but they needed people to invest in the war effort. We needed money. So they appealed to the American people to almost like donate their money, but a war bond with the intention of getting that money back, possibly with interest, I'm not sure, once the war was over. So how are they trying to get people to buy into this and buy these war bonds? Don't let that shadow touch them. Basically, if you don't buy these war bonds and help fund the war effort, your kids are going to grow up speaking German. Like the Nazis are going to win, right? Gosh, that's a huge, huge appeal to values and needs. Gosh, it worked like a charm though, didn't it? The next one, gee, I wish I were a man. I'd join the Navy. Be a man and do it. United States Navy recruiting station. We see this little wisp of a girl in a Navy uniform, also from World War II, I believe. But we're appealing, you know, we've got some be a man and do it. So like this repeated slogan that you would see in the Navy posters. It's appealing to a man's need to feel accepted, to belong, and to be masculine. To not be made fun of, because if this little wisp of a girl wants to join the Navy, then by golly, you should too. You cannot let her be more of a man than you are, right? Also worked. The next one, you see the guy and the girl there in an embrace. You know, he volunteered for submarine service. And why would you want to volunteer for submarine service as well? Because look at the girl, look at what he's getting in return. So now instead of, I mean, there's still that appeal to patriotism, you know, love of country, love of democracy, but there's also definitely a sexual appeal to it, you know, knowing that a lot of men would view the poster and think, wow, okay, maybe I will join because if he's getting girls like that, you know, I could too. Anyway, there's a lot more that can be said about this particular poster. If you're interested to know what else I would have to say about it, feel free to, you know, send me an email or even with your own thoughts. There's a little bit of humor injected into this one as well, but I'm looking at it more now for those purposes of propaganda and the kinds of appeals it's making, and it's a pretty obvious appeal to our desire for sex, or at least men's desire. I don't really, you know, I don't know if we have a women's equivalent of this type of propaganda poster. Oh gosh, this one. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. Join a car sharing club today. So this is where the logical fallacies come in. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler? I don't follow. That's a bit of a non sequitur there, right? definitely appealing to a lot of different values here. Um, Gosh, this one just boggles my mind. I can't believe anybody would actually make this poster. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. How does that even make sense? Um, but we all hate Hitler. We all fear Hitler. So we want no association with that man whatsoever during this time. So I guess it would have been effective, whether it makes sense or not. Um, you're certainly not going to let yourself be likened to him. If it makes sense. Um, then we get into some more current ones. So I have some propaganda posters pulled up for the first one here is for Barack Obama um, during presidential campaigns. So our first one is a three panel poster that has his picture in each panel. And the first two is pretty much the same pose, and the third one is a little different profile shot, almost straight on, but not quite. And underneath each picture are words. We've got hope, progress, change. Very short and sweet, very easy to repeat, very easy to create a slogan out of. And then we have one on the bottom underneath that actually does have his slogan on it. Yes, we can. Definitely a propaganda technique right there. We're getting a little bit of appeals to country and patriotism. They've got the red, white, and blue stars above him. And then we've got in the third image, we have an appeal to character as well, because we have veterans for Obama. So no slogans this time, not even a picture of him. All we're wanting to do is simply associate him with military veterans because we respect them, right? So if they are for Obama, then that lends credibility to Obama's campaign, and perhaps we should consider voting for him as well. Yeah, easy and simple it is to just make sure all that stuff is in there. So next few are from Hillary Clinton's campaign. Hillary has the experience. Hillary has the vision. Hillary for America. Experience, vision. So there are definitely appeals there to what we value. We value experience. We value being creative and being forward thinking. Well, most of us do. She has the vision. Hillary for America, appealing to our sense of patriotism. And then you could almost kind of see the repetition in that as well, but those aren't necessarily her slogans. You get down to the two on the bottom and you get more into the repetition, the slogans. So I'm with her. Share if you are too. So now we're tapping into that value, our need for belongingness, right? Our acceptance. Almost like a bandwagon appeal, right? So if everybody else is doing it, oh God, maybe I should too. I don't want to be left out, or I don't want to look foolish, whatever. So subtle, but so effective. It's big, right? Gosh, it's obvious, but yet at the same time, it's not. And then the third one, stronger together, right? That's her slogan, easy to repeat, and just driving it into our heads, right? Then we get President Trump's campaign posters as well. So the big one, the larger one on the left-hand side, we've got "It's time for another real president." And we have Trump's picture next to Ronald Reagan's, and they're both superimposed in front of a waving flag in the back. And we've got the White House underneath. "Make America Great Again, Trump 2016." Definitely a strong appeal to character here, likening him to Ronald Reagan. Such a patriotic poster, and then of course his easily repeatable slogan, "Make America Great Again." I don't know. And maybe it's just because of the rise of social media and interacting with people more in that way, but God, that slogan seemed to take on a life of its own, more so than any that I'd ever seen in presidential elections. We've got a couple more here for Trump as well. We have Take Back Our Country, right? Ooh, gosh, definitely appealing to some hardcore values there. And then the bottom one, hashtag Drain the Swamp, vote Trump. Drain the Swamp was another pretty big slogan. Not necessarily like his main one. His main one was definitely Make America Great Again. But Drain the Swamp was definitely a repeated phrase throughout the campaign. So all of these, you can see how the propaganda is working. I think when we look at political posters like this, we tend to see it a little more. We're expecting it in a way. We know they're going to make those strong emotional appeals. We know there's probably going to be some logical fallacies somewhere along the way. We know that it's going to be exaggerated and over the top. So we see it a little easier in the political posters, but it's everywhere. You really have to keep that same critical eye open and be just as skeptical with other advertising or other posters and other campaigns as you are with politics. So, the propaganda kind of just forgets all reason, right? There's really no logic to it. It's all about those appeals to values and needs. And when people are victims of propaganda, and I'm not saying that if you chose to vote for one of those candidates that you're a victim of propaganda. That's not it at all. But when we do fall victim to propaganda, we begin to accept something as truth, as unquestionable truth. And that's where we get into trouble. When there's no room for doubt, when there's no room for questioning, then propaganda has succeeded, if you will. So how do you know if something is propaganda versus just persuasion and like normal persuasion? Does it use those tools of propaganda to crush different points of view? Does it minimize the nuances? Does it try to get rid of the gray area? Does it try to imply that it's either or? There's no in between. And does it squash potential reflection? Does it urge the audience to simply accept what's being said and not think about it? Is it being fed to us in a way that it's clear they're not asking us to consider this thing? It's more direct and aggressive. Those things all together probably pointing towards propaganda. So just to kind of wrap things up, we have arguments that emerge from our value systems. There are a lot of shared values that we have in our culture, and they aren't always obvious in the argument. They kind of sit quietly underneath the argument, but in reality, they are the driving force. You can have all the facts that you could possibly have, and without those appeals, those values and assumptions, the argument isn't going to be as effective. But in conjunction with thinking about how values play such a role in argument, don't forget those 4 arguments in disguise: the objectivity disguise, the personal taste disguise, spin, and propaganda, and how those tap into our values and not necessarily for positive things. You guys have any questions about the values and assumptions part 2? Let me know. Otherwise, go ahead and move on to the next item in the module.